The Humboldt hustle, the rain in Eureka wasn't falling. It was attacking. It sheeted against the windshield of Leo's beaten-up Ford Ranger, each drop exploding like a tiny water balloon. He squinted through the frantic swish of the wipers. The towering redwoods on either side of the 101 highway becoming dark, hulking giants in the stormy twilight. 10 more miles. 10 more miles to a payoff that would either get him out of this godforsaken county or leave him buried in it. The package on the passenger seat wasn't big. A vacuum-sealed brick, wrapped in plain brown paper. It smelled faintly of earth, pine, and money. A lot of money. This was the finest Emerald Triangle MJ, not the commercial stuff, but a rare heirloom strain called Humboldt honey, grown in a secret clearing by a man who talked to his plants. A man who was now very, very dead. Leo was just the driver. The muscle and the brains were supposed to be Silas, but Silas was currently cooling on the floor of a rented cabin with 2 holes in his chest. The deal had gone sideways before it even began. The buyers, a crew from Los Angeles, had decided to simply take the product and eliminate the middlemen. Leo had been in the outhouse when it happened. He heard the silenced pops, saw the shadows through the crack in the door. He'd stayed frozen for an hour after their black SUV tore out of the gravel driveway, his heart hammering against his ribs. Now he was alone, with the product, and a phone that had been buzzing non-stop for the last 30 minutes. The buyer, a slickster named Mateo, was trying to call him. They'd missed the product. They'd missed him. The phone lit up again. Unknown caller. Leo's thumb hovered over the decline button, but then he stopped. He took a shaky breath and answered, putting on his best panicked voice. Silas. Man, where the hell are you? Mateo's voice was smooth, a practiced lie. We've been at the spot for 20 minutes. Leo coughed, making his voice sound raw. It's Leo, Silas. Silas is gone. Cops. They must have been tipped. They raided the cabin just after you left. I barely got out with the package. Silence on the other end. Leo could almost hear the gears turning. The lie was a gamble. If they had police scanners, they'd know it was bullshit. But city guys like them, up here in the wilderness, it was possible. You have it. The entire brick. Mateo's voice was sharper now, greed cutting through the false concern. Yeah, I got it. But this changes things. Silas was the negotiator. I'm just the driver. The price. The price just doubled. Another silence, longer this time. Double is a lot of money, friend. It's a lot of MJ, Leo countered, his eyes fixed on the dark road. And it's a lot of risk. You want it or not. I've got another buyer lined up in Oregon. A straight shooter. No complications. It was a bluff of epic proportions. Leo had no other buyer. He had $93 in his bank account and a landlord who pounded on his door every first of the month. Wait, Mateo said, the smoothness gone, replaced by cold steel. Don't do anything rash. Double it is. But we need to meet now. Somewhere public. The parking lot of the Sequoia supermarket. Off the 101 1 hour. You come alone? In a different car? I see that black SUV. I disappear. And you explain to your boss how you lost 200 grand of Humboldt honey. He hung up before Mateo could reply. His hands were trembling so badly he had to pull over. He dry heaved onto the wet shoulder, the adrenaline a toxic cocktail in his veins. He wasn't built for this. He was a low-level hustler, a guy who moved dime bags to tourists and an ounce at a time to the locals. This was pro-league stuff. He arrived at the supermarket 40 minutes early, parking at the far end of the lot under a flickering light. The rain had eased to a miserable drizzle. He watched families loading groceries, kids begging for candy, old men shuffling inside for coffee. A world of normalcy he was no longer part of. Right on time, a clean, nondescript silver sedan pulled in. One man got out, Mateo. He was dressed like a tech guy on vacation, Patagonia vest, jeans, clean sneakers. He looked around, spotted Leo's truck, and started walking. Leo's mouth went dry. This was it. He had the brick in a plastic grocery bag on his lap. His other hand rested on the tire iron under the seat. Mateo tapped on the window. Leo rolled it down just a crack. "Let's see it," Mateo said, his eyes scanning the parking lot. Leo held up the brick. Mateo's eyes gleamed. "Good. Money's in the car. Pop the trunk. I'll get it." "No," Leo said, his voice firm. "You bring the bag to me. I count it. Then you get this." A flicker of irritation crossed Mateo's face. He nodded and walked back to his car. Leo watched him like a hawk. He saw Mateo open the passenger door and lean in. He wasn't just grabbing a bag. He was reaching for something. "It's a setup," Leo didn't think. He turned the key, slammed the truck into reverse, and stomped on the gas. The truck lurched backward, just as Mateo straightened up, a pistol in his hand now, fitted with a long silencer. Fet, fet. 2 holes punched into the Ranger's tailgate. Leo wrenched the wheel, spinning the truck around. He threw it into drive and floored it, speeding past the supermarket entrance. In his rearview mirror, he saw Mateo sprinting back to his sedan. The chase was on. Leo knew these roads. Mateo knew horsepower. The sedan was faster, closing the gap quickly. Leo took a hard right, off the highway, and onto a narrow, winding service road that led up into the hills. The redwoods closed in, creating a tunnel of darkness, his headlights cutting shaky paths through the rain. The sedan was right behind him, its high beams flooding his cabin. A bullet took out his side mirror. Desperation took over. He remembered this road. It led to the old fire lookout. And about halfway up, there was a turnout, a cliffside view of the ocean. He pushed the groaning truck as fast as it would go, tires skidding on the wet gravel. The sedan stayed glued to his bumper. There, the turnout. He didn't slow down. At the last possible second, he wrenched the wheel left, skidding into the turnout and slamming on the brakes. The truck slid to a halt, facing the road he'd just come up. The sedan, taken by surprise, shot past him. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Leo threw the truck back into drive and smashed into the side of the sedan as it was reversing, T-boning it with a horrific crunch of metal. The driver's side door of the sedan was pinned against a giant redwood. Mateo was trapped. Leo grabbed the tire iron and jumped out, the rain soaking him instantly. He ran to the sedan. Mateo was struggling, his airbag deployed, dazed but trying to free his door. Leo didn't hesitate. He swung the tire iron, smashing the passenger window. Glass exploded inward. He saw the bag on the passenger seat, a thick, black duffel bag. He grabbed it. "You're dead. You hear me?" Mateo screamed, fumbling for his gun, which had fallen to the footwell. Leo didn't wait. He sprinted back to his truck, threw the duffel bag and the brick of MJ inside, and sped off, leaving Mateo screaming into the stormy night. 20 minutes later, hidden deep in a logging road, he finally stopped. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He unzipped the duffel bag. It was full of money, neat, bundled stacks of $100 bills. He'd never seen so much cash in his life. And next to the money, nestled in the center, was a GPS tracker, its little red light blinking rhythmically, steadily, betraying his location. They'd never intended to pay him. They'd intended to take the MJ, shoot him, and use the tracker to find the money and retrieve it later. Clean and simple. Leo stared at the blinking light. He started to laugh, a ragged, half-crazed sound that was swallowed by the rain. He was just a driver, but he was a driver who'd just outrun a gangster and was now sitting on a fortune. He reached into the bag, pulled out a handful of bills, and then grabbed the brick of Humboldt honey. He opened the door and walked 100 paces into the redwood forest. He buried the money and the MJ in a deep hole under a fern-covered log, marking the spot in his mind. Back in the truck, he zipped the duffel bag shut, the tracker still blinking away inside. He started the engine and pointed the truck south, towards Los Angeles. He'd drive the bag right to Mateo's boss's doorstep, a delivery, and with it, a message. But first, he had a stop to make. He needed a new pair of shoes, a better car, and a one-way ticket to somewhere far away. The tracker blinked on, leading his enemies on a long, expensive chase to the heart of their own empire, while his future sat quietly buried in the quiet, wet earth of Humboldt. The blinking red light was a heartbeat, a tiny, mechanical pulse counting down the seconds until a world of pain arrived. Leo looked at it, sitting in the duffel bag of money, like a venomous snake, and his fear began to crystallize into a cold, sharp plan. He couldn't run. Not yet. The tracker meant they would always find him. He couldn't destroy it. The second it stopped moving or sent a distress signal, they'd know exactly where to look for him and their missing money. No. The only way out was through. He drove back towards the 101, but not towards Oregon. South, towards the beast's lair. He found a 24-hour truck stop outside of Willits, a place where no one looked twice at a beat-up truck or a man with wild eyes. He parked between two big rigs, their diesel engines rumbling like sleeping dragons. First, he counted the money. $250,000. Silas had been lowballing them. The sheer weight of it was terrifying. He took 5,000 in small bills, stuffing the wads into his pockets, his boots, and the Ranger's hidden compartment behind the glove box. The rest he left with the blinking tracker. Next, he went into the truck stop store. He bought a prepaid burner phone, the cheapest sneakers they had, a dark gray hoodie, a map of California, and the largest thermos of black coffee they could sell him. Back in his truck, he made 2 calls on the burner. The first was to a guy who knew a guy in San Fernando. He spoke in a low, coded murmur, arranging for a specific item to be acquired and left in a specific location. It cost him 2,000 of his emergency cash. A bargain. The second call was to the only person in LA he halfway trusted. An old flame named Chloe, who worked as a dispatcher for a private ambulance company. She owed him one. From a time when a bad batch of something that wasn't MJ had hit her brother, and Leo had gotten him to a hospital. No questions asked. Chloe, it's Leo. I need a favor. A big one. And I can make it worth your while. He heard her hesitation, the background static of her headset. Leo. Jesus. What time is it? You sound like hell. I am in hell. I need you to listen. I need you to tell me everything you hear about a certain silver sedan. License plate. He squinted, picturing the car pinned against the tree. Double quotes ... 8XJL392. It's involved, heavily, and the people in it are not good people. Any chatter about it? Any calls for a tow from the Humboldt area? You call this number, immediately. Leo, what did you do? I'm trying to undo it. Can you do this? A long pause. Yeah, I can. Be careful. He hung up. The plan was taking shape, fragile and insane. He was going to deliver their money right back to them, but not as an apology, as a declaration of war they wouldn't even know had been declared. He drove through the night, the burner phone on the passenger seat. The rain stopped as he crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, the city of San Francisco glittering like a promise he couldn't keep. He didn't stop, just outside of Salinas, as the sun was bleeding into the sky. The burner phone rang. It was Chloe. Your sedan, she said, her voice tight with tension. It got called in. Some hiker found it off a service road near Miranda. Smashed up, driver's side pinned. No one inside. Leo's blood ran cold. No one inside. Mateo had gotten out. He was loose. What else? The description of the driver, from the first responders. It matches you, Leo. They're putting out a bolo for your truck. They're saying you're armed and dangerous. They'd framed him. For the wreck, for whatever they'd done to Silas. Of course they had. He was the perfect patsy, small-time hustler, with a record. Thanks, Chloe. I owe you. You owe me by staying alive. There's more. The guy's looking for this car. They're not cops. The chatter is on encrypted channels. These are serious people, Leo. He knew. He was driving towards them. He hit Los Angeles as the morning commute was hitting its peak, a river of steel and frustration. He followed the map to a self-storage facility in Paco. He used a code he'd been given over the phone, and the gate buzzed open. In Unit B-19, tucked behind a stack of old tires, was a small, heavy package wrapped in oil-stained cloth. His purchase. He didn't open it. He just placed it carefully in his glove box, next to his stolen cash. Now, for the delivery. He drove to the address Silas had muttered weeks ago, a trendy art gallery in Culver City that was a well-known front for money laundering. He double-parked a block away, his heart thumping against his ribs. This was it. He took the duffel bag with the tracker and the bulk of the money. He walked calmly to the gallery's sleek, black delivery entrance, a single steel door in an alley. He didn't hesitate. He rang the bell. A camera above the door swiveled towards him. A moment later, the door was opened by a massive man in a suit that barely contained his muscles. He looked Leo up and down with pure contempt. Yeah. Delivery for Mr. Voss, Leo said, his voice surprisingly steady. From Humboldt. The man's eyes flickered with recognition. He grabbed the bag and made to shut the door. He'll want to check it, Leo said quickly. The product's in there too. The special MJ. The whole brick. The muscle man hesitated, then grunted, pulling the bag inside and slamming the door shut. Leo didn't wait. He turned and walked away. Not too fast, not too slow. He got back in his truck and drove around the corner. He pulled out the burner phone and the prepaid credit card he'd bought. He logged into an anonymous email service. He had drafted the email days ago, a tip to the DEA's field office, detailing the Voss Gallery's operations, the shipment of narcotics, and the specific, rare strain of MJ known as Humboldt honey that was being delivered this morning. He attached a grainy photo he'd taken of the brick weeks ago, as proof. He hit send. Then he waited. He didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, the quiet street erupted. Unmarked sedans and black SUVs screeched to a halt, disgorging agents in tactical vests. He saw the muscle man from the door being slammed against a wall, cuffed. He saw agents carrying the black duffel bag out of the building, the money and the brick of MJ in evidence bags. He saw a man in an expensive silver suit, Meister Voss. He presumed being led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and confusion. The tracker had led the law right to its doorstep. Leo allowed himself a single shaky breath of victory. It was over. Voss was arrested. His operation was in shambles. The money and the MJ were in evidence lockers. Mateo was a ghost, but his entire world had just collapsed. He was free. He drove out of LA, heading east into the desert. He found a motel off Route 66 that took cash and asked no questions. In the dim, dusty room, he finally opened the package from San Fernando. It was a pistol, clean, untraceable, and heavy in his hand. He hadn't known if he'd need it. He was glad he hadn't. He slept for 14 hours straight. When he woke, it was evening. He showered, put on his new sneakers, and got in his truck. He had one last trip to make, back north, back to the Redwoods. It took him 2 days to get back to the turnout. The silver sedan was gone, towed away, leaving only skid marks and broken glass. The forest was quiet, soaking up the sun. He found the log, dug up his buried treasure, the 5,000 he'd left, and the remaining brick of Humboldt honey. He held the MJ for a moment. This thing that had cost Silas his life, and nearly cost him his. It was just a plant. It was people who made it dangerous. He drove to a cliff overlooking the Pacific. He took the brick, and with a great heave, he threw it out into the wind. It spun end over end, a dark speck against the vast blue, before disappearing into the waves below. He got back in his truck. He had enough money to start over, somewhere quiet, somewhere without giants, without rain, and without the sweet, dangerous smell of Humboldt MJ. He pointed the truck east, toward the desert, and drove towards the sunrise, leaving the ghosts of the highway behind him. The desert was a clean kind of empty. After the claustrophobic green of Humboldt and the frantic pulse of LA, the vast, sun-bleached silence of Arizona was a balm. Leo found a dusty motel on the outskirts of a town so small it was barely a whisper on the map. He paid for a week in cash, using the name on his oldest, least important, fake ID. For 3 days, he did nothing. He slept. He ate greasy food from the diner next door. He watched the heat shimmer off the asphalt and the stars wheel across the black velvet sky at night. The $5,000 felt like a fortune and a prison sentence. It was enough to disappear, but not enough to stop looking over his shoulder. The image of Mateo's sedan, empty and wrecked, played on a loop in his mind. No one inside. Mateo was out there, a wounded, furious animal whose entire empire had been burned down by a driver he considered a nobody. Men like Mateo didn't just walk away, they hunted. On the 4th day, the paranoia became too much. The money was a liability. It was traceable, at least in theory. Serial numbers could be recorded. He needed to clean it. He drove 50 miles to a larger town, one with a sprawling Native American casino rising out of the desert like a neon mirage. He changed $500 into chips at a quiet blackjack table. He played for an hour, his movements robotic, his mind elsewhere. He wasn't there to win. He was there to launder. He cashed out his remaining chips for $180 for a fresh batch of bills. It was a slow, tedious process, but it felt like progress. He was erasing his trail. He was walking back through the glittering, cacophonous maze of slot machines, the air thick with cigarette smoke and desperation. When he saw him, or thought he did, a man in a dark baseball cap, head down, weaving through the crowd, the same build as Mateo, the same way of carrying himself, a predator trying to look like prey. Leo's heart seized. He ducked behind a bank of worry, blinking machines, his breath catching in his throat. He peered through the forest of chairs. The man was gone, vanished into the crowd. It was just a ghost, a phantom conjured by his guilt and fear. But the shock was a bucket of ice water. He wasn't safe. He would never be safe, as long as Mateo was breathing the same air. He drove back to the motel, the desert sky now, deep, bruised purple. His hands were clenched on the wheel. The brief peace he'd found was shattered. The $5,000 in his glove box felt like evidence. The gun felt like a necessity. That night, In his cramped, dark room, he made a decision. Running was a temporary solution. It was a lifetime sentence of fear. The only way to truly be free was to know, for certain, that the threat was gone. He had to stop being the prey. He still had one card to play. One connection to that world. He took out the burner phone. Its battery was low. He plugged it in and called Chloe. "You're still alive," she answered, her voice a mix of relief and anxiety. "Barely. I need one more thing, Chloe. The last thing, I swear." Leo, the man in the silver sedan. Mateo. "The bolo on me was a frame job. He's out there. I need to know if he's talking, if he's looking for me. You hear everything. You must have heard something." There was a long silence. He could hear her breathing, the faint crackle of radio traffic in the background. She was weighing the risk. "There's chatter," she said finally, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not on official lines, on the kind of channels people like that use. They're looking for a rat, a driver who skimmed the product and sold them out to the feds. The word is, the boss is offering a bonus for proof of life, and then proof of death." Leo closed his eyes. So it was true. The manhunt was on, and he was the prize. Anything else? Anything specific? Just one thing. A name. El Oso. They said to check with El Oso, that he'd have leads. It's probably a nickname, a street name. Il Sante Berlio knew that name. Everyone in the Northern California MJ trade did. El Oso was a legendary grower, a recluse who supplied the ultra-premium, boutique strains to a very select clientele. The kind of clientele who wouldn't blink at a $2-100-N-50-1000- brick. He was also, famously, paranoid and violent. He was the one who had grown the Humboldt honey, and Leo had just thrown his product into the ocean. A new, more terrifying puzzle piece clicked into place. Voss and Mateo weren't just distributors. They were El Oso's distributors. Leo hadn't just stolen from a LaCrue. He had stolen from, and then destroyed the product of, the most feared grower in the Triangle. He had traded one powerful enemy for an even more powerful, and infinitely more vengeful one. "Chloe," he said, his voice hoarse. "Forget I called. Delete this number. You never heard from me. Leo, what are you going to do?" He looked at the gun on the motel nightstand, then out the window at the vast, indifferent desert. "I'm going to stop running," he said quietly, and ended the call. The plan that formed in his mind was suicide. It was the only thing left. He couldn't hide from El Oso. The man's network was too deep, his roots in the community too old. Leo was an outsider. He would be found, unless he brought the fight to them. He still had one thing they wanted, the one thing that could get him in the door. He still had the story. He spent the next day preparing. He used more of his cash to buy a second, even cheaper burner phone. He bought a notebook and a pen. That evening, he sat on the scratchy motel bedspread and began to write. He wrote down everything. The deal with Silas, the shooting, the chase, the tracker, the delivery to Voss. He wrote it all in a clear, factual narrative. He didn't paint himself as a hero, just a desperate man who got lucky at the end. He added a single line. The attached audio file contains a confession from Mateo Rodriguez, implicating himself and his employer in the murder of Silas Brennan and the framing of the author of this document. It was a bluff. He had no audio file, but the threat of one was a powerful weapon. He sealed the letter in a thick manila envelope. On the front, he wrote a single name, LOSO. The next morning, He drove back to California. He wasn't running away this time. He was driving straight into the heart of the beast. He was going to the one place everyone would least expect him to be, the Emerald Triangle. He knew better than to try and find El Oso's compound. That was a quick way to get shot by a paranoid guard. Instead, he went to the nearest town with a semblance of commerce, a place called Garberville. It was a town that ran on MJ money, where everyone knew someone who knew someone. He went to the town's oldest, most respected feed and supply store. It was the kind of place where deals were made in whispers between bags of chicken feed. He bought a few unnecessary items, making small talk with the grizzled old man behind the counter. Heard there was some trouble up on the ridge, Leo said casually, leaning on the counter. Some LA guys causing problems. The old man grunted, not looking up from his ledger. Don't know nothing about that. Yeah. Shame. Heard they messed with the wrong people. Messed with El Oso's product? That got his attention. The old man's eyes flicked up, sharp and assessing. He looked Leo over, seeing a stranger, a city kid. You hear a lot of things. Son, I do, Leo said, his voice low and steady. He slid the manila envelope across the counter. I need this to get to him. It's about his product and his reputation. The old man didn't touch the envelope. He just stared at it, then back at Leo. That's a dangerous piece of mail. It's a more dangerous piece of mail if it doesn't get delivered, Leo said. He placed 5 $100 bills on top of the envelope. For your trouble. He turned and walked out, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had just announced his presence to the most dangerous man in the state. He had thrown a stone into the hornet's nest out now. All he could do was wait in his truck, parked in clear view down the street, and see if the hornets came for him. He put his hand on the gun in his glove box and watched the feed store door, ready for whatever happened next. The hunter had become the bait, of course. Here is the continuation and conclusion of the story, ending with a question that serves as a final thematic hook. He didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, a man emerged from the feed store. He wasn't the old shopkeeper. This man was younger, with a thick beard and eyes that scanned the street with practiced efficiency. He held the manila envelope in his hand. His gaze landed on Leo's truck, paused for a heartbeat, and then he turned and walked down a side alley, disappearing from view. The message was clear. Follow me. Leo's mouth was dry. This was the point of no return. He could start the truck now and flee, back to the desert, back to a life of running. Or he could get out and walk into that alley, not knowing what was on the other side. He thought of Silas, dead on a cabin floor. He thought of Mateo's empty car. He thought of the vast, silent desert and a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. He got out of the truck. The alley was narrow and smelled of damp earth and fertilizer. At the end of it, the bearded man was waiting by an unmarked black SUV with tinted windows. He wordlessly opened the rear passenger door and gestured for Leo to get in. The interior was plush, silent, and cold. As soon as Leo sat down, the man closed the door, got in the driver's seat, and pulled away. No one spoke. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the town behind and climbing higher into the mountains, onto private roads that weren't on any map. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of redwoods and something else to faint, sweet skunkiness of premium MJ. They finally stopped at a heavy steel gate, set into a high fence, topped with razor wire. A camera swiveled to look at them. The gate buzzed open. The compound inside wasn't a rustic shack. It was a modern, low-slung fortress, built to blend into the forest. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. Leo was led inside, through a sterile, airlocked hallway, and into a spacious office. The walls were lined with screens, showing live feeds from every angle of the property. Sitting behind a massive redwood desk was a man in his 60s. He had the weathered hands of a farmer, but the cold, calculating eyes of a kingpin. This was Loso. On the desk in front of him was Leo's opened envelope. El Loso didn't invite him to sit. He just stared, letting the silence stretch. A tactic meant to intimidate. "You cost me $250,000, El Loso said finally. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, and a very rare genetic strain. "The people who worked for you tried to kill me and framed me for murder," Leo replied, forcing his voice to stay level. "I was just the driver. I got lucky. I survived, and then I got even. By giving my product to the DA, by giving Voss's operation to the DA, I was returning your money. They were the thieves, not me. They were the ones who disrespected you. I read your letter. I know you understand the difference." El Oso's eyes narrowed slightly. He picked up the pages of Leo's story. "This is an interesting fiction. You claim to have a confession. It's insurance," Leo admitted. "A copy of that letter and that alleged audio file is with a lawyer. If I disappear, it gets sent to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency from here to Sacramento. It names you, it names Voss, and it names Mateo. My death makes you a prime target. My silence, on the other hand, is guaranteed if I get to walk away." It was the biggest bluff of his life. There was no lawyer. There was no audio file. El Oso leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He looked from Leo to the letter and back again. A small, grim smile touched his lips. "Mateo is a problem. An ambitious, stupid problem. His failure has been noted." He pressed a button on his desk. A side door opened, and two of his guards entered, dragging a third man between them. It was Mateo. His face was bruised and bloody, one eye swollen shut. He'd already been to see El Oso. "He was found skulking around my perimeter," El Oso said casually. "He came to beg for another chance, to blame a driver for his own incompetence." Mateo looked up, his one good eye widening in pure, unadulterated hatred when he saw Leo. You little El." Oso held up a hand, and Mateo fell silent, trembling. "You see," El Oso said to Leo, "you brought a problem to my doorstep, but you also delivered the solution." He nodded to his guards. "Take this trash out to the back 40. The forest is hungry." Mateo began to scream, a raw, terrified sound that was cut short as the door closed behind. Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. El Oso had just casually signed a man's death warrant in front of him. "The problem is solved," El Oso said, as if he'd just ordered a pizza. "As for you, your insurance is annoying, but it shows initiative. You're not just a driver. You're a survivor. We have a vacancy for a distributor. The LA market is now open." He was offering him a job, a partnership. It was more money and power than Leo could have ever imagined. It was also a golden noose. To accept would mean living the rest of his life under the thumb of this ruthless man. But to refuse would be an insult, and El Oso did not tolerate insults. Leo looked at the man who held his life in his hands. He had come here for freedom, and he was being offered a gilded cage. He had wanted to stop running, and was being asked to run a much larger, much more dangerous race. The money was on the table. The power was his for the taking. All he had to do was say yes, and his old life would be erased forever. But could he ever truly be free, if his freedom was bought with a soul sold to a kingpin?